Welcome to the AfricaNEV podcast. Today is a bit different. Today, we want to have a conversation on air quality improvements due to the COVID-19 outbreak. As we know, due to lockdowns of manufacturing movements, what we have seen is that there have been changes in air quality. So today we have on our podcast our special guest, Frederick Otu Larbi. I think he will introduce himself more when he starts his presentation. And of course, our own Olukokunto Lope and two other guests, Esther and Geraldine, whom you cannot see currently. So Fred, please, the ball is in your court.
Okay, thank you very much. So as you've just said, my name is Frederick Otu Larbi, and I'm currently a PhD student at the Lancaster Environment Center at Lancaster University, UK. So a couple of days ago, my friend Gamily got in touch that you'd like to have a conversation about air quality improvement due to COVID-19 and how that may affect economies over the African continent. So I just put something together that I think I could share with you, and then we can get into some form of discussion.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess we'll start with just thinking of what really air quality is. When we say air quality, what does it actually mean? And when we talk about air pollution, what do we actually mean? So air quality basically looks at the composition of the air and how clean it is. And air pollution basically is the presence of particles or gases in the atmosphere, which makes the air harmful or poisonous for humans and animals. And there are certain activities and things that cause air pollution in general. And these come from both natural and artificial sources. Artificial, I mean human caused pollution sources. So these range from things like agriculture, so the application of fertilizer, and then also chemicals. We have industrial activity, so all the factories that we have, they burn fuel, and that fuel can lead to air pollution. There's air pollution that comes from our households. So when we cook or we heat up our houses, from our refuse, from transportation, which is one of the major causes, and then also natural causes such as sea spray, dust, and forest fires. And so on the right-hand side, you can see the relative contribution of each of these major sectors of the economy to air pollution. And you can see vehicles and industry contribute the greatest share of particulate matter into the atmosphere. Why should we worry about it? Well, the answer is mostly because it has implications for our health and it leads to deaths. So globally, about 8 million people die every year from air pollution.
8 million?
Yes, about 8 million people die every year from air pollution related causes. And these are things to do with heart diseases, respiratory diseases, lung cancer, and other types of disease. It also has implications for things like Alzheimer's disease and memory in children. So air pollution affects a lot of things. It also has implications for our general well-being and mental well-being. So on the right-hand side is just a map of the places where air pollution leads to the greatest number of deaths. So the deeper the color, or the higher the number of deaths, and you can see that over parts of Asia and sub-Saharan Africa, the numbers are quite high. And this is the number of people who died per 100,000 population. This is relative to 2017 numbers. So these obviously have been ongoing for several years. Every year, people die from air pollution because we need to get to work, we need to drive, we need to run our industries, and so on. Therefore, the pollution levels are very high usually, and that causes diseases, which then leads to death. And so when coronavirus came around, and particularly in China, and they shut down the factories, shut down their transport systems, basically locked down the country, people started noticing a change in pollution levels. And the reason it was very easy to notice is because China is one of the most polluted countries in the world. China, India are two of the most polluted countries in the world, and they have the highest death rates in terms of absolute numbers in the whole wide world. So millions of people die in China and India every year from pollution. And so when there is a huge change in the pollution levels, it's very easy for it to be noticed. And so as early as February, when China had locked down, news headlines such as these ones started coming up about NASA images showing pollution clearing up amid the slowdown or lockdown, and this was all over the international media scene. And this was actually backed up by real images. So on the left, you see satellite images of, this is in January 2020. And then on the right-hand side, you see February 2020. So you can see that the yellow colored areas were basically polluted. And then by just a month later, when the lockdown went into effect, you can see the country is almost clear. There's hardly any pollution. On the right-hand side, where there's the boxes with various images, the top ones are 2019, and the bottom ones are the corresponding period for 2020. So for example, the top box is January 1st to 2019, and the bottom one is January 1st to 2020. And again, you can see very clearly that when you compare 2020 to 2019, there's a massive decline in air pollution levels over all of China. And this is NO2. NO2 mostly comes from industries and from vehicles. So once the industries had been shut down and the vehicles and trains and everything had been stopped, the pollution cleared. So this extended to the rest of the world. Once coronavirus spread to Europe, the Americas, and so on, similar impacts were seen. So this is a study by IQ Air, a company based in Switzerland. And what they find is that in 10 of the most polluted cities in the world, you can see almost everywhere, if you compare reduction in 2020 air pollution relative to 2019, for India, for example, there's a 60% decline. Going all the way to, say, London, where there's a 9% decline. The only place that stands out is the anomaly is Rome, where pollution levels have rather increased. But then even if you compare 2020 to the 4-year average, which is the fourth column, you see there's a consistent decline. So across the world, there were decline in pollution levels. So, and that's again, basically because everybody's home, cars are parked, industries are shut, and so pollution levels generally decrease. But of course, so as we know, coronavirus started in China, and then it got to Europe and so on by late February, early March, and then got to Africa by the second week of March, thereabout. So this is couple of plots showing air pollution levels. The top ones are over Ghana. So we have in the top left hand corner we have this is Ashanti region, so Espresso. In the middle we have Tetakwashi interchange. So there's a sensor around Tetakwashi interchange measuring air pollution. And in the right hand corner, we have Ola Secondary School. So this is Cape Coast.
What region?
No, actually, this is Cape Coast.
Is there an Ola Secondary School in Cape Coast?
Yeah.
I know Ola girls.
Yeah. Okay, this is actually Cape Coast.
Okay.
Let me see. Yeah. But basically, the story from all three, for example, in Ghana, is that you can see, so this is starting from September 2019 to May 2020. And you can see that we started the year in January with very high levels of pollution. And then as the year has gone on, the pollution levels have declined rather rapidly. And then the bottom ones are also examples from other countries across Africa. So we have here Ouagadougou on the left. In the middle, we have Nairobi. And on the right-hand side, we have Lome. Unfortunately, I couldn't get anything from Nigeria, Olukokun. You probably should speak with your government to install some pollution monitors or make the data available. That's another thing we can look at.
Okay.
Yeah, but then if I need to say that often when we look at these pollution episodes, we immediately attribute it to the shutdown of industries and so on. And that's a huge part of it. But there's also the issue of meteorology, so the weather patterns. So I can say, for example, if you look at Accra, between January and March, we have the Harmattan season.
Okay.
The Harmattan season is generally associated with high levels of dust. So you have lots of dust particles, and therefore particulate matter 2.5 is likely to be very high in that period. Whereas by March, April, and May, the rainy season starts. And so when the rainy season starts, the rains tend to wash out all the pollution. And therefore, it's possible that although coronavirus has had some impact, this decline is not entirely down to coronavirus. And it is also the case for most of the other countries. In fact, I've seen some analysis where people have actually gone ahead to disaggregate the data into the impact of coronavirus and meteorology. The general trend is that because we've all shut down, we have all stayed home and so on, definitely the pollution levels have come down, but then in some cases, meteorology has played a part. In Kenya, for example, I know they've had very heavy rainfall over the last few weeks, same in most East African countries. So any drop in pollution levels, one contributing factor would be the fact that industries and cars and everybody is at home, but then the meteorology has played a part. So we need to keep that in mind as well. But then the question perhaps we need to think about then is what happens when coronavirus is over? What happens when we've lifted our lockdowns and so on, as has happened in Ghana and other places? Now, so you can see the headline at the very top here, air pollution on the rise in China as coronavirus lockdown ends. So once the factories and transport systems kick back into action, pollution levels have started going up again. And if you look at the plots in the middle, you'd see that towards the very last one, if you can see it, the pollution has started picking up again. the color starts looking red again. And that's because China is basically restarting its economy. People have started moving again. Now, we've seen this before. So in 2014, China hosted the East Asian community. It's most like our ECOWAS in West Africa, or OAU or AU. They also have their grouping. Now in 2014, China hosted the meeting. Ahead of the meeting, they decided to clear up the country. And so they stopped factories, they stopped cars, and so on. So the picture you see at the bottom is two pictures taken from the same spot. So you can see the two buildings. If you look carefully, you see two buildings with the same buildings. One was taken at different times. This is what happens in a normal Chinese period. And this is what happened when the Chinese government stopped almost all economic activities in order to clear up Beijing for the conference. They wanted Beijing to look nice. They wanted the air pollution levels to come down. So they were able to force everybody to shut down, and therefore the atmosphere became very nice. Pollution levels dropped. But then the question is, after the Apex summit, what happened? They went back to life as usual, business as usual, and therefore the pollution levels came back to normal levels. This is actually very well studied in the literature. It's called the APEC blue. So it's reference to these blue skies that was seen in Beijing as a result of the APEC summit. So it's generally referred to as the APEC blue. It's a very well researched topic, and it indicates how we can use policies to clean up the air or the environment over a short period of time. But if it is not sustainable, we are very likely to return to business as usual. I can cite another example of what happened in Accra during the lockdown. So those in Accra would know that when the country went into lockdown, the military were sent outside to clean up parts of the city. So we saw pictures of military men going around cleaning up Accra and so on and so forth. But once the lockdown was lifted, Accra is back to its normal environmental situation with filth and so on over places. That's because it wasn't sustainable. It was just, it's like a 9-day wonder. That's what coronavirus is doing to air pollution, in my opinion. It's essentially a 9-day wonder. Eventually, we are very likely to return to business as usual if we don't put in sustainable measures. So far, I don't see a lot of countries, either in Africa or anywhere in the world, putting in sustainable policies going forward. Yesterday, I did see a story that said the UK government, for example, wants to put in money so that people can, to create cycling lanes so that people can cycle to work and so on, because people will generally be apprehensive of using public transport after coronavirus. There's a fear of a second wave and so on. So people may be apprehensive. They want to put in more cycling lanes and more walking lanes for people to be able to walk or cycle to work. How sustainable that will be is yet to be studied. And I don't see many countries actually coming up with similar policies or programs. And that's because everybody seems to be saying, well, we want to get back to normal. We want to get back to normal. The question really is, should we go back to normal? And what should be normal? Should normal be the business as usual, or do we need changes in our way of life? And that is where there will be implications for us. Already there have been some implications for our economy. When you shut down factories, cars are not moving, there's the likelihood of reduced growth, GDP growth. In factories and companies are losing a lot of money because businesses are not working as they should. The There's also a slowdown in global demand. So demand for oil, demand for goods and services have slowed down, and therefore economies around the world are likely to suffer, and that includes Africa. That then could push people into poverty and so on. So there are threats for us. But there's also opportunities for us to restart our economies, to think carefully about what should be the new normal. We could use this as ground zero to kick off green economy, so-called, to think about new ways of transport, of transporting ourselves from our homes to work. Because actually most people live within, say, 5 miles of where they work. And most of our commute without the heavy traffic would be less than 30 minutes. So if you live in say Medina, sorry, Olukokuna, I don't know Lagos, so I can't use Nigerian examples.
No problem.
If you live in say Medina and you want to travel to Accra, on a Sunday or in the night, you could travel from Medina to Accra Central in 20 minutes or less. But on a typical Monday or Tuesday morning, you could be in traffic for 2 hours. Now, if there were cycling lanes and so on, and you know your safety is guaranteed, there will be lots of people who may prefer to cycle from Medina to work. It's not that far. So we need to start thinking about such ideas going forward. It's also, in my opinion, of coronavirus implications for our economy. It offers us an opportunity to build a fairer and just society. So often when we measure how well our countries are doing, we do so with things like GDP, with and other such measures. Now these are averages. If there are 5 people and one person earns, say, 100,000, and the rest earn 1,000 each, if you strike an average, you may end up saying, on the average, each person is earning 20,000 or 21,000. But in reality, most of the people in that group are earning 1,000. Only one person is earning 100,000. And yet, because of that one person's earnings, you've pulled the average higher to 21,000. It gives you a false idea of well-being or doing well as a country. It may be that we need to rethink some of these ideas about growth, about prosperity. What coronavirus, I believe, gives us that chance to think about these things. Do we want people to still be selling in traffic and so on? Is that really how we want to move forward, or do we want to create a society where people can work, earn a living, but not have to breathe in exhaust fumes from morning till evening? Yeah, I think I would end the presentation here, and then as you ask the questions, perhaps we can expand a bit more. Thank you.
Wow, you're welcome. That was a very fantastic presentation.
So thank you very much. I think we have learned some new things, and some old things have been touched upon. Olukokun, I want to give you the floor first.
Otu Larbi, Frederick, that was a very fantastic one. And coincidentally, I was talking to a person in the automobile industry, and we were talking about all of these things.
Yeah.
And the first thing we spoke about was that the whole world right now, they are stressed of the lockdown.
Yeah.
And by the time life is returning to the new normal, this recklessness might come in, and we might do a lot of more damage than we've been having for the past few years.
Yeah.
Because another thing we discussed is that there are both negative and positive sides of COVID-19.
Yeah.
And especially for us in Africa, this is the time to grow. This is the time to get things right. This is time to move from 0 to 100% or 50 at worst on the average. So, I mean, your presentation is getting more clearer, and with the statistics the guy shared with me yesterday, he said in few weeks ago they gave Americans some relief fund, and within that same week, I think between $1,000 and $1,800 were sent to different homes. And within that same week, online sales went up by 800%. And he made mention that in times of crisis like this, where we have price drop in oil, I mean, oil prices drop and so much, that is when, in history, that is when American went for all these V8, V12, all the trucks and all of that. So there is this tendency of us saying, okay, I want to recover all I've lost when we return back to the new normal, and we are doing a lot of more damage to the environment. So all of this, I believe if the government are seeing what we are talking about right now, this is the time to tighten up their policies and enforcement. It's not just about making policies, it's about enforcing those policies. I mean, for instance, look at China. If China will remain clear, if they will remain low on air pollution, this is the best time to do that. And with all the figures you've shared, you know, I believe they should be able to do that. And like the information you just gave to us, I just want to quickly summarize about England trying to have more bicycle lanes.
Yeah.
I think this is a good thing. This is the way forward, because cycling is for last mile as well as longer distance when it's electric. I mean, that's the essence of making electric bicycle, for you to be able to travel a longer distance. And for this pandemic, we've been able to see that personal transportation is the best way to go by, you know. So I a country like Netherlands will not have issues because bicycles are much more than human population there. So I believe they will be able to adapt easily. And some other countries that are already, you know, in the forefront of this sustainable environment, Norway and one other country like that. So I believe the opportunities from COVID-19 is much more than the threats. Yeah, that's my submission.
Anyway, Frederick, I mean, I
Yeah.
have questions. I have
Okay.
questions. Looking at my submission. First of all, if you were about to give you a magic wand, okay, you wave your hand and post-COVID, what will your ideal world look like from a air pollution perspective?
It's interesting. In an ideal world, I'd like to see us doing away with fossil fuels. So a world where we've stopped using petrol, diesel, coal, especially, and switched to more renewable alternatives like solar panels and so on. But then the reality is that it may actually be the opposite after coronavirus, because as oil prices have dropped, people have become more skeptical about public transport, because you don't want to sit in a train with 100 other people who could infect you. So people are more likely to drive themselves to work and so on. Those who don't have cars may be forced to buy cars, especially if the price of petrol and diesel are very low, as they are now. So my ideal world would be that we start doing away with fossil fuels. But the reality is that the opposite may actually happen.
Yeah.
as a follow-up, right now, and I'm pro EVs anyway, very, very much so. Right now, with the advent of electric vehicles, you see, before, if we had this COVID-19 thing maybe 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, there is no other alternative than fossil fuels. There is no other alternative. Be it for transport, for industry or whatever, or agriculture. But now there are alternatives, mainly because of energy storage solutions. So we now have batteries that are becoming cheaper and cheaper. Consequently, things like electric vehicles. I think because of the COVID, either next year or between now and 2023, electric vehicles should reach price parity with how do you call it, normal petrol cars.
Hopefully.
All right.
Yeah.
Not hopefully. I think next week is a Tesla's battery day, right? I am pretty certain now. Now I am almost certain that the technologies they will announce next week or 2 weeks time will mean that their cars will become almost as cheap or even cheaper, as well as their energy storage solutions for solar systems and all not, than fossil fuel technology. Okay. The challenge then becomes policy and systems and frameworks. From your presentation, I had a distinct impression. It's something I used to get from Gamali, that getting data, especially for Africa, it seems to be a challenge, because all the data you shared about Accra, Togo, I think Ouagadougou, they were all from the US.
Yeah.
Which is very strange for an African, from an African perspective, because you're talking about African data. Yeah, I'm saying now. How come? What have been some of your challenges?
Yeah, so in terms of getting data from Africa, it's a huge challenge, and it's definitely this is not the first time perhaps anybody is talking about it, but part of it is we don't really have, in a way, we feel sharing the data makes us lose some of its value, but actually it's the opposite. The more you share your data, the more value it gets. So, for example, these data sets are being measured by African countries. So in Ghana, it's being measured by the EPA, for example. But if you go to the EPA's website, the data is not available. You have actually checked EPA's website. You can't find the data. Sometimes the projects and so on that funded these come from overseas, and so they are forced to put the data on overseas servers, which is why we are able to pull them from various sites.
What you are saying is that the local African governments are averse to sharing data.
Exactly. I mean,
but they are scientists, right? The EPA, they are full of scientists, and they are good scientists.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
I mean, look, I worked for the Ghana Meteorological Agency. If you go to GMET's website and you're looking for, say, rainfall data for the last 5 years or so, you won't find it, because you need to go to the office and you need to pay for it. Whereas if you go to most other data meteorological agencies around the world, they may just ask you to register, fill in a form online and say what you want the data for, and then they send it to you. So there's some we have a certain mindset about sharing data.
Is it that they don't take it, think it is as important? Because I get a feeling that, you see, you mentioned Nigeria. I'm sure if I said Olukokunov is a whole Nigeria, no data, Kenya, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a story that repeats across the continent.
It is a sad situation, especially for researchers. In fact, one of the issues about coronavirus in Africa is even data. So in Ghana, when you follow the discussions, people have been complaining about, so when the Ghana Health Service announces these data, the numbers, there's no, the breakdowns and so on, giving it out in a format that somebody could easily make a plot and so on, it's often very difficult. You need to sit down and go through and write it down yourself or create an Excel sheet yourself. It's something that cuts across various sectors across Africa. It needs to be improved. It needs to change very quickly, but it probably would take time.
Yeah, if I may come in, Africa, you see, African countries, if we do not fund research, we cannot have data. We are too lazy to dig for them. And when it comes to evaluation, we don't do it as much as we should. So I don't see how we could have data. And the little one we have as well, the integrity are very low. The integrity is very low. So I don't know if God is still on. I wanted to take him up on the Tesla technology that is expecting would drive the price of electric vehicles. You see, one of the major big points of this technology from fossil fuel to electricity is the price point. And so far, people have been claiming that fossil fuel technology is easily accessible, easily available, could be expensive, was actually cheaper to renewable energy, but later became more expensive because of the development of renewable energy and all other alternatives and all of that, and the demands and all of that. I'm not an economist, so I don't want to dwell too much on that. So, but then now that the oil prices are dropping really faster and plummeted even almost to zero, people are not interested in that because the cost of purchase is usually the problem with electricity. I mean, with electric vehicle and all of that. And that is why Tesla is trying so much that if I should bring the battery prices down, I can drive the price of the electric vehicle down. But I don't see Tesla being the only person that can really determine the price of electric vehicle. They can do that for their own, and that is why for many years they couldn't declare any profit. So I wish God is on so he could hear me and we could discuss this as well. This, for now, post-COVID, electric vehicle sales might suffer so much because, one, the oil prices are down. Fossil fuel is quite cheap right now, so people want the cheapest because
it's cheap at the pump.
They are coming from a surviving mode. They just want to survive, and before they can now launch into something new entirely. I know maintenance-wise, electric vehicle will end up in the long run. It's very cheap, and of course, that I'm biased for electric vehicle, but this is reality.
Anyway, Oluwaku, I think that this one we'll continue in the next conversation. Because we are hijacking. Sorry, Frederick.
We mentioned it, so that's why I wanted to.
Okay. It. But we'll continue in the next interview with Percy. But I wanted to ask, like what we are looking at right now, we see particulate matter 2.5.
Yeah.
Most people don't know what that is. So can you tell us the composition of the air pollutant? You mentioned nitrous oxide.
Okay.
What are the various constituents, and each one, how does it relate to personal health and well-being of air pollution?
So the reason I've shown this particulate matter over Africa, mostly that's one, because that's the data available, but it is also the one that has the most impact on human health. So particulate matter 2.5 means that these are very tiny particles, smaller than 2.5 micrometers. So they are very, very tiny, which means we can easily breathe them
very
in,
tiny.
And they can go all the way into our lungs and cause damage. There is also particulate matter 10.0 and so on. But as you get closer to the lower the number, the more dangerous it is for our health. There are other pollutants like NO2, which I talked about. There's also ozone, for example. There's carbon monoxide and so on. But and they all have impact on our health, depending on the quantity that is in the air. So for each of these pollutants, the WHO, which is the World Health Organization, has recommended limits that you should not exceed. I don't have them readily offhand, but for ozone, for example, it's about 40 parts per billion. It means you should not exceed 40 parts per billion. For particulate matter 2.5, I think it is 25 micrograms per meter cube or something like that. So basically, most of these countries on this map, basically, if you are in the green line indicates safe levels, you see. So what it means is that for Ghana, almost all the cities are above the safe levels of particulate matter. We are hovering around the yellow, which is, if you can say, an alert level, something that says you are getting over the limit. And then once you get into the red and purple, it means you're
in danger zone.
In danger zone, yeah.
Okay. Now, another question. I realize that Africa has, in terms of the map you showed earlier of air quality, the global map, you saw that Africa has a high level of air pollution. Almost, matching, maybe not this one. There's one, good, this one. Matching, yes, this one.
Okay, so let me try.
Matching.
Let me try and explain that again. It's not actually. This is not actually pollution. This is death rate per 100,000. So, for example, although India and China have very high death rates from air pollution, because they have a huge population, India is
it is spread by the wider population.
So when you spread it, the numbers become smaller. So you need to understand it in that context. Of course, when you normalize it this way, it helps to show you which people are more susceptible to air pollution and so on. So it definitely is worrying for Africa, but then it is not an indication that Africa is highly polluted.
It's a population of it's a function of the population base, the bigger population base.
Exactly.
But in that vein also, does the nature or the quality of our healthcare systems play a role?
It does. And also, if you look at, that's why when I talked about after coronavirus, fairer society and so on. Now, if you walk through Accra or Lagos or Nairobi, you find street hawkers. Lots of people selling in the streets during traffic rush hour. This is rush hour is the most polluted time of the day. And this is also the time when people need to sell to make a living. So they are basically breathing in very high pollution levels, much higher than the recommended levels.
In other words, they are exchanging their
life
economic health for their physical health.
Exactly, and there's a general in the air quality research area. There's a general understanding that poor people usually don't care about air quality. Now you have to decide: do I go out there to sell and make money to buy food, or do I worry about air pollution and go hungry? Yeah, air pollution can kill me. Maybe it will take 10 years of my life, but hunger will take all of my life.
This is the same discussion that is being had now about lockdown versus.
Exactly. So,
I mean, Elon Musk famous. I mean, we don't. I don't want us to go there. But
yeah.
As an aside, where do you stand? Where do you stand in that conversation? Do you feel that we should lock down to help with the uptake of the virus, or do you feel that we should, forgo the lockdown and just find a way to live with the virus?
In Ghana, my personal view is that it's too late. We lifted the lockdown too early, and the spread has already gone through the population.
Accelerated.
Yeah, so locking down again may not be as effective as if we had continued for, say, 2 weeks or 3 weeks more, and then lifted it. But that's my personal view.
Nigeria,
it's not backed by any science.
No. See, the economies of African countries cannot survive under lockdown. So every African nation is trying to see how to make this work. Nigeria is basically in debt right now, so lockdown will not work except we all practice a high level of personal hygiene and all of that.
Okay. Now let's talk about the causes of air quality. You listed from the graph you showed us. It's clear that transportation and industry are heavy. But I want to assume that it's a global average.
Yeah,
okay?
Yeah.
Because if you come to Africa, and I'll use Ghana as an example, since you can understand Ghana, you see that most of our fossil fuels, our energy sources, is fossil. Most of them is fossil.
Yeah.
And they are used mainly to either cook. So in terms of domestic energy consumption, most energy consumed in Ghana already is for cooking. And most of that, about 60 or so percent, and don't hold me to that, is firewood and charcoal. All right.
Yeah.
So if you look at the data, you see that most people cook with either firewood or charcoal. In the villages and in certain parts of the urban slums, apart from those using gas, majority of the people in the cities are using gas. Then, of course, you have petroleum emissions. Now, I remember the last time I had a conversation with Gamale. He was telling me about, there is indoor pollution caused by cooking.
Yeah.
And then there's outdoor pollution caused by vehicular traffic and industry. Now, when it comes to indoor pollution caused by the sort of fuels we use for cooking, do you see a future? Because I remember when I was in school, secondary school, my school father used to have this hot plate, electric hot plate. So we used to cook. I don't know why that has not, for example, been marketed. Can you speak to that indoor pollution?
Okay.
And
so let's start from the electric hot plate. To be able to use it, you need to have electricity.
That's it.
So
I think Olukaku is jittery.
No. When you ask that question and you are saying you didn't know why it has not been marketed, and like I was like, is it enough with electricity?
No, I was talking about the Nigeria contest per se. This is a Ghanaian contest.
we
are different too.
In this issue, that is having this issue of electricity. It's not only Nigeria, But what anyway, let's Frederick conclude this.
So basically, that's one barrier to using, for example, electric It is also a similar reason why we are not using gas in the villages, for example. How much does it cost to fill up that 12 kilogram can of gas? It's probably 100 Ghana cedis or something like that. For the woman or man in the village, he can see firewood, which cost him nothing. He can just go and pick them from his farm. Whereas the gas, he probably has to travel, maybe take a taxi, travel to a different town to fill up on gas, and then buy a gas stove and so on before he can. It's money he doesn't have and a convenience he cannot afford. So firewood and what do we call it? Earthenware structure, he has food. Now again, it goes back to the same thing with the people who sell in traffic. Do you stop cooking because the air pollution will kill you in 50 years' time, or do you cook and you get it? Are you going to go hungry because of air pollution, or will you rather cook and then eat and live for 50 years and then air pollution takes your lungs? So again, going back to the issue of poverty, poor people generally don't think about issues like climate change, air quality, air pollution. For the very poor people, life is about survival from day to day. You're not going to use your life to save Mother Earth. It won't happen.
I want to say something really fast. For the issue of electric cooker and the lights, I believe there are alternatives, and those are the briquettes. That's why they call them this smokeless kind of cooking, like sawdust or something. But it's not sawdust per se, but it's briquettes.
Yeah.
That's being pronounced so much right now. It doesn't have smoke and all of that. And again, I wanted to ask, okay, what do you think? Who is doing more harm to the environment? A peasant farmer cooking with firewood in his village, or someone driving a fossil fuel car in the urban center? I believe those in the village have a remedy, and that is the number of trees that grows around that place that can suck up the CO2 they are actually producing. So, so far, I think where we should put our attention is not that peasant farmer that is trying to survive or eat, is the urban center majorly. So, I mean, depending on your take.
I agree. I agree that the peasant farmer contributes far less, and in fact, the whole of Africa contributes far less to, say, climate change than China alone.
Yeah.
They call us the carbon sink of the world.
Yeah, so it's really not. That's why there's a concept of climate justice, so that in taking climate action, you don't apply it equally to everybody. Otherwise, you end up making the rich richer and the poor poorer.
Yeah.
But you know, as you raised that topic, I think I was looking at some data, and what I saw was that the people who will be most affected by climate change happen to be the poor people.
Exactly.
The poor countries who are not the cause.
Yes.
I mean, relatively speaking. I mean, it raises some questions. Geraldine, you have been quiet so far. Do you have any comments or questions for Fred? Hello?
Hello.
Yeah.
I think we should concentrate and start tackling it from the rich side, that's the cities. Because most of the pollutions from the cities are not for survival's sake. is opulence. Everybody wants to drive in his or her own car to work, whereas we could all join a bus. So that's causing much pollution than somebody in the village who is trying to cook for his or her family to eat. So it's caused mostly by the rich folks and not the poor. And that's what we should look at.
But Geraldine,
Yeah.
and this is to the entire panel. Our continent is urbanizing very rapidly, and our population is exploding. So the cities are going to become bigger, and the problems that we have that we are not able to solve now are going to compound. Now, the suggestion you are making, I'm just playing a devil's advocate, please. The suggestion you are making makes sense, but how can we implement it when already our systems are failing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's like there's this. Christians still there with me. There's this scripture where the Bible talks about if you are not able to run with footmen, how can you run with people on horses? I think you cannot compete at a lower level. How can you compete at a higher level? That is my question to you. Do you have any ideas?
I think there should be rules and regulations. Because when we listen to what Fred said, most of the pollution is caused by vehicular sources. And then most of these vehicles are private. So if there could be rules, for instance, public transport cheaper than, say, private cars, or for instance, parking spaces are expensive. Like some sanctions to prevent people from getting personal cars, unnecessary pollutions everywhere. And then, for instance, like Ghana, I heard they've stopped importing second-hand cars and all that. I think those are some of the little things we can do to start something.
No, I think the policy is for now there'll be a phasing. So very soon, cars over 5 years or so will not be allowed
Because
to be imported.
I'm not sure your economy can survive. I mean,
I
can
mean,
cope.
Oliver has a lot of strong views on that, but I don't want us to go there. You see,
Okay. I have a question though.
okay.
I've been trying to struggle and read about it, but I think if Frederick, Esther, or Geraldine could help, that will help a lot. This concept of CC, I mean, this carbon credit, I really need to understand it better. And why have we not been profiting from it in Africa? I mean, if we are the carbon sink of the world, why are we not trading with this carbon credit and making some money to develop our renewable energy and other clean tech? So can you please help me with that?
Yeah, okay, I'll comment on that. Just to say quickly that I'll need to leave in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So carbon credits.
We actually we have exhausted our time. So.
Yeah. So in terms of the carbon credit system that has been established, it is the idea that if you, for example, are not developing, so you are not polluting, we can give you a quota, and then you sell your quota to another country or company which is polluting, and then you receive money for it.
Yeah, I understand that part.
Yeah, but the issue is that it means stopping development in your country or in your society or your village or your town in order to benefit. But actually, most African countries, although our pollution levels are low, are net polluters. So we are producing more pollution than our trees and so on are taken out of the environment. So we are net polluters. So we are also polluting. Just that we are not polluting at the level of, say, China or India and so on.
Yeah.
And then the carbon trading is I think it's the complexity involved that makes it difficult for people to be able to go out there and just say, here, I have this number of credits, would you buy it? It's a bit complex. And then the need for every country to develop also means that nobody wants to stop their development in order to sell that as a credit.
Esther, you cannot say anything.
Yeah, so I've been following what is going on, but maybe quickly, just what I want to say is that I'm looking at the post-COVID pollution in Africa, because currently most governments are advising their citizens to go into industrialization. So it means that there is a chance that industrialization is going to spring up, and that can affect our pollution. However, we can invest in renewable energy. Most of the time, most governments feels it's not a priority and that they do not invest funds into that aspect. But COVID-19 has made us realize that government can bring up money. Like Ghana, all of a sudden they brought $100 million, is it dollars, to fight it. So it means that the government can actually invest in renewable energy. So if there is a possibility that government can enforce the the policy of using renewable energy, that will really help to reduce pollution. That's basically my submission.
Yeah.
One last round of questions to everybody. Do you believe that things will be the way they used to be post COVID-19? As in, before COVID-19 and after COVID-19, do you believe that the world and the way we live our life will remain the same? Geraldine.
I think it may be worse.
It may be worse.
Yeah.
Wow, that's an answer.
Okay, so basically, because statistics says COVID-19 is not going out of our daily lives anymore. I mean, for the next 2 years, we are still going to be having these cases. So I think it's a long time. And like Geraldine said, it's going to be worse, except there is a strict enforcement. Human beings are reckless, and they always want to recoup lost times and which is really unnecessary. So, and that could be very dangerous for the environment. So it could be worse, and but there is a remedy. And it's likely in the hands of the government to enforce the strict law for hygiene and like that. That's my submission.
Esther,
I really didn't hear your question.
do you believe that the world will be the same as it used to be post-COVID?
Oh, I think it can be better, because now people will be very careful. Previously in the UK, people could cough anyhow. Like it wasn't annoying or a threat for people to cough, because it was just normal. But now people will be careful. So I think that in our daily lives we may be careful, and I believe that there may be a vaccine or some remedy for COVID-19 where people can be saved in one way or the other. So I think things can be different if only we will learn from what has happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is your position?
Okay, so in terms of, I think what happens depends on which path we take. And if coronavirus taught us anything, it is valuing our basic necessities. So food, shelter, clothing, safety, the very basic stuff that we often take for granted. Now, after coronavirus, if we decide to keep on that track and realize that really life comes down to getting as much as you need, not more than you need, the world will be a better place. History teaches us that that doesn't happen. And so, yeah, we human beings as we are, people actually, as was stated earlier on, the moment people got their monies, the first thing they did was to go shopping, online shopping. Last week, there were queues of people in the US waiting to go and buy sneakers because Nike has, has new sneakers out. So I hope for the best.
Not for survivor.
I hope for the best, but I fear the worst. I think we'll probably be worse off.
Okay, I think I would get an optimist. I believe that not because of, but actually because of human nature, and in spite of policies and regulations, because I believe that with the new innovations and technology that will emerge, it's going to force people to adopt that because it makes more economic and financial sense. Anyway, thank you very much all for coming. Our two beautiful ladies especially, they have been very quiet throughout the discussion, but they have made very relevant contributions. This is the AfricaNEV podcast. See you later.
Maybe